Welcome to our second podcast. The last time we were together, we talked about our new app that had just hit the Google Play and Apple stores. So it's available. Go get it. Check it out. And I introduced you to our head of content strategy, Allison Hayerdahl. In this episode, I'm really excited to introduce you to another key member of our team, Kyllie Knight. Kyllie joined us just over a year ago, in January 2022, and she's been an amazing asset to the team. She heads up our social media strategy, and she produces inspiring and beautiful content that really celebrates the heart of what Leva is all about. Her passion to support women on their journey with their newborns all the way through, older children is so wonderful. And we're really excited that she's part of our team. And I can tell you, as you'll probably see in this podcast, that when Kyllie is with us and we start chatting, I feel like the conversations just roll and so many great ideas come out. So it's been a true pleasure. All right, so Kyllie.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction.
True, it's true. And I love these things because I feel like I get a chance to just actually express how grateful I am.
So sweet. Nothing like being introduced like that.
Oh, well, you need to have that experience more often. So, Kyllie, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional background, and how you came to be part of the team.
Perfect. Vanessa, I studied BA and I did my honors in brand management and leadership. And I went straight into industry. I think at 21, I started out and I kind of just had a passion for digital. And I think it was kind of like at the space where, or at the time where everything was kind of exploding with social media. And I kind of just I think it was the right place, right time. It was the beginning of my career and I kind of just went with it. And I spent about 4 years working in corporate and advertising. I worked on some really cool brands, big brands, but I didn't want that. I wanted my own business. And I think that reality of the situation is that I wanted that business because I wanted children. I wanted children really badly. And
awesome.
I had a mom who was always there at pickup and who was, hustling behind the scenes, doing some work in the mornings, but she always was there for us and she always showed up and she was always around. So I kind of just couldn't imagine any other way. And so I knew in my head, I'm a planner. So I thought, well, I've got to start this business before I have kids because everything was on a schedule. And that's what I did. And I mean, it's 8 years later now in this business. And I've had my 2 kids, as you know, and they're 5 and 2 now. And I've tried really hard to do this whole mom working life balance. And I honestly believe that every single day is a struggle. And it's not, I don't mean that in a horrible way. I love my life and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love what I do. I love that I committed to this and I have designed a life that I want and I can be there for pickups and all of those types of things. But there were definitely downfalls in having this. I didn't get any maternity leave. Well, I guess I didn't take any maternity leave. Let's be clear. So I haven't really had a break. And I guess that does tend to be difficult. And you also do tend to think you can do everything. You can go to the coffees and because you can just work a bit later and eventually it gets a lot.
Yeah. So it catches up with you.
Yeah. So that's me. I am, again, as you know, I always tell a longer version of the story, but that's me. I am still doing my business, and I met Alison, head of content at Leva, at a wedding last year. Not met her, sorry. I just bumped into her again. She is a family member, and we kind of, I guess it was right place, right time. And we started chatting. We had a few glasses of wine, and I guess here I am.
I love it. I love that the conversation over wine was like everyone was probably a little relaxed, and it just kind of
relaxed.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go back and ask you 2 questions, maybe 3, over what you just said.
Cool.
Okay, so first, you graduated, you're 21 years old, went right into the corporate life. I always find that really interesting because when I was 21, I was very, that wasn't my life. I got a job as a sales assistant doing kind of more administrative tasks because I graduated like after the dot-com bubble burst, and I was in a city that just really didn't have any tech jobs. And so it was just, a friend's mom really hooked me up with a job. And so I feel like I bounced around a lot before I started my career. And I was like mid-20s before I really started my career. So what led you like to advertising? How did you know that's what you wanted to do? And how did you have the wherewithal at 21 to really start focusing on your career?
I think it's who I am. I think I'm an extremely ambitious person, and I've always been focusing on the next thing, and sometimes that's to my detriment. I actually studied originally, my BA was specializing in design because I'm creative.
Nice.
And while I was in this design school, we did a whole lot of it was a BA in design and advertising, and I really enjoyed just the conceptual work. Um, and eventually, I did my honors in it. My honors was simply because, to be very, very frank, my dad was still paying, and I wanted another year. I was only 21.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Honors, is that like a master's? Is that the same
Uh,
equivalent
it's
in the US?
one. Sorry. It's after a degree, but less than a master's. So it's one before a master's, one above a degree.
Oh, okay, cool. Hey, learn something new every day.
Yeah. So, and you do a thesis. It's kind of like that. So
That's
I
great.
I did that, and then I got placed in an internship. And I got like this dream internship, which was at Elle magazine, which is
Oh, wow.
for a young 20-year-old girl who loves fashion, and was the heyday of the magazines. And you know, I was living the dream. Everybody wanted to know, how I did it. And anyway, I there wasn't even at the end of the 3 months internship, I was not going to leave. Like I was going to make
Yeah.
a plan for myself. And anyway, I ended up convincing them to create a job for me, and they did. And I kind of just loved it, and I started working in the online. I made jobs for myself, or the online department. And then after, I think it was about a year later, I thought, I can't do this. I'm 22. I need to go and travel and see the world. Otherwise, I'm going to get stuck in this. And I'll never forget. I went traveling with a friend of mine, and I was sitting in a what do you call those things? Uh, Backpackers in
The
Barcelona,
hospital.
in Spain, and everyone else on the Kentucky tour was downstairs drinking, and I was taking an interview outside like the bathrooms, and I just realized that this is who I am, and I need to stop denying it. I can't do this. I don't know, and I'm free, and that it's just not me. I love that, but it's just not me. I can't do it. I'm a control freak, and I was very clear on what I wanted out of life. I wanted a family, and not ashamed to admit
Mhm.
that that's what I wanted. And so I wanted to start my life, and that's how I did it. And I followed my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, thank God. Otherwise, I would have felt terrible about it. But I followed him, and we went to the big city, which was in the South African big city, which is Johannesburg. And we kind of just had fun and built our careers.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, one more question and then I'll move on. But I'm curious, you mentioned your mom and how she kind of balanced working and taking care of you. And really, I mean, it sounds like setting an example for what you kind of saw as, maybe a good life and a good mom.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really cool story that you shared because I feel like so many folks don't have that relationship with their moms,
Yeah.
or maybe see their moms that way. Could you talk a little bit more about what that was like and how it kind of set things up for you?
Yeah, sure. So my mom was, you know, she didn't get a degree or anything like that, but she really was, and she is an incredible mother. She's the mother that everybody wants. She really is. She is. She's still to this day. I mean, she's currently with my child in the park while I do this, and she really is. She's just an incredible mom. And I remember she had two jobs. She kind of did some. She tapped up insurance reports, and then she started like a jewelry business, and both were great. And we loved them because they were kind of like half day, but you could see she was doing those in the half day while we were at school so that she could be with us in the afternoon. But I know that now I see that it's not just work when in the mornings. There's other things like thinking about lunch boxes and thinking about school uniforms and thinking about tidying the house and all those types of things. So she was doing it all. But she
Yeah.
was always there. She was always the mom that was at pickup, and she was always the mom that was on time. And we always won the Easter hat competition or the dress up competition because she just did everything. And she was there, but she was also bringing in money for the family. And my dad worked away a lot, and she managed it all. So I want to be there, and yeah, but I also want to have a career. So I guess I'm trying to find that balance of, not of having a career, like an ambitious career, but also being like my mom. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I also really think I really want Charlotte, my daughter, to see me doing this, to see me working hard and contributing, and to be able to, if for some reason something had to happen to my husband, or we had to look after him and he wasn't the breadwinner necessarily, that I could step up and be that.
That's awesome.
I want her to see that we can do that as women.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. That is so great. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
Taking the leap from corporate life and saying, I want to have my own business. It's something a lot of people dream of and never do. And you did it, and you've been at it for a while.
yeah.
How did you come to that decision, and how did you have the confidence to take the risk?
So I did it because I did it at the right time. And I can understand now why it's way more difficult as you get older. But remember, I was at the time 26. Yeah, 26. I had just got engaged, and we really didn't have that much to worry about in terms of finances. My husband was earning a good enough salary, and we could pay our rent, and that's all we needed. We needed our 1 bedroom. We had a 2 bedroom flat, and what else do you really need? I mean, we had food, and we both have sets of parents that are incredibly supportive, and would have been there for us if we really needed it. Yeah, so I think Tom was extremely supportive, because I think he also wanted this family, and his mom at the same time was also very similar in that she also was there for them. I mean, she also had a job, but she was also there for them. So I think we both had the same base. So he was supportive, and it just kept going. And to be honest, there was no other way for me. I
Yeah.
saw the mom struggling, and I was in advertising agencies. I'll never forget hearing a mom. She was pregnant, and she was vomiting in a cubicle stall next, in the bathrooms at the office. And I just thought, I can't do that. I just can't. I can't. If you're sick, so sick, you're pregnant, and you're vomiting in the cubicles at work, like, you should be at home. Like,
Yeah.
you should be at home, even if you're emailing at home. It's too much. And I saw moms leaving early, and it was always frowned upon. I just said, I'm never doing that. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to be in the situation where I can't get up and leave if there's something. And I have so much respect for moms that do that, so much. But it wasn't about them. It's just about, obviously, the people you work for. This was
Yeah.
pre-COVID, so there was nothing else other than the 9 to 5 model. That was just how it was. And especially in advertising, I just didn't. There's a lot of after work drinks and all those types of things, and just didn't want to be there, to be honest.
Nice. I love that. I love that you had your own terms of how you wanted to live your life, and you said, no, I'm not going to go with what kind of the standard is. I'm going to define something else. That was so cool.
Yeah, but it's not always the easy way out, right? Like,
Oh, I'm sure.
really isn't. I mean, there's been, as I say, I didn't get maternity leave, and I guess I wasn't there for my kids then, and there's so many other things that I haven't had the time for, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, great. Let's talk about that, because that's the next topic that we want to cover. So you have two kids. You mentioned, Charlotte is 5 and Ed is 2. And you had some different challenges along the way with them, right? Especially with Ed. Can you tell us about, obviously, with Leva, we want to support moms regardless of how they choose to feed their babies. Breastfeeding formula, really, it doesn't matter as long as the mom is feeling good about her decision, and we're there to support her. How did you decide how you wanted to feed your babies, and what was that experience like for you with each of them?
So they were very different experiences. The first being Charlotte, and at the time I was 28 years old. I was the first in my group of friends to have a baby. I had no idea what having a baby really was. It was, okay, you're going to have this baby and you're going to put the baby on your breast and the baby's going to feed. There was nothing more to that to me.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a perfect pregnancy. Literally nothing went wrong. Everything was perfect. To be honest, a perfect birth. Everything was idealistic. But we went to an antenatal class. I don't know if that's what you guys call
Is it
the
before or
pre-birthing class, I guess,
yeah.
at the hospital
Yeah.
that they offer you. And I remember we went, and Tom and I went, and it was a whole morning, and literally all it was about breastfeeding and about the birth. But it wasn't about breastfeeding support. It was about breastfeeding and the benefits of it in terms of the
Oh,
nutrients and all that kind of thing. It was nothing, maybe a few tactics, whatever, but there was no like, your nipples are gonna get sore, and you might get this feeling of anxiety, or you're gonna have to the baby might feed for 2 minutes and then cry, then you have to do it again 50 times, and there was nothing about that. It was just,
yeah.
this is how it is. And the husbands were all in there, and then we walked out like this happily little family, me and Tom. And Tom is the type of person, like, his children must have the best, and he was like, we need to make this work, you need to breastfeed. And he, in true Tom style, made sure I had a lactation consultant, made sure I had the best possible package with this woman. And I had pre-sessions with her. He booked her to come to the birth. Like, there was nothing spared. Like, he wanted this child
Wow.
breastfeed. I mentioned one thing in there about how it helps the brain function, or I don't know, whatever they said. Tom heard brain. Tom is an intellect, and Tom was like, we need this. So that's what happened. And I went for my first pre-consult with this lady. She was lovely. She showed me a few things, latches, footballs, and this and the next thing. And I remember I burst out crying in the session, and I had no idea why. I think I was just so hormonal. Anyway, she arrived post as I say, again, the perfect birth. It was a cesarean section. I went in, popped the baby out, came out, held the baby. Everything was fine, lovely. Like, all my friends came in to visit. There was no COVID. There was no nothing. It was wonderful. She was there as I was rolled out into recovery. She was there. She gave me some jelly babies with sugar on them, and she put the baby on my breast. Everything was so perfect. Like, you can't ask for more. And I think, if I'm very honest with you, it just got to the point where my anxiety took over. I didn't immediately bond with Sean at the beginning, which is quite weird for me to even say out loud, but it wasn't like this overwhelming feeling. I remember just there's videos of me going, this is so weird. Like, it was for me, it was weird. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the feeling of her on my breast, and I didn't. Tom was trying so hard. He was like massaging my breast to get the milk and stimulate it, and I was just not interested. I was doing what I needed to do. I didn't like it. And I think I did it for about a week. And when I got home, and every time I heard her cry, I would like cringe inside. I was like, oh, and then someone would bring her to me and put on my, I hated it because it just felt like I couldn't get away. I didn't like that feeling. So here I am, this most independent person who can't even be confined to 9 to 5. Now you're telling me that I have to literally be this child's lifeline. And also, in my picture of how this whole motherhood thing worked was, I do my work on my laptop and the baby sits next to me, and that's how we do things.
Right.
That's that, and then the baby goes to sleep, and then I feed the baby, and then I go back to my meeting. That's how, this is my absolutely ridiculous impression of motherhood. But anyway, long story short, Vanessa, I ended up going with Tom for vaccinations. And I remember the nurse that was giving him, she took one look at me and she said, how are you doing? And I just started to cry. And I think she saw this 28-year-old girl who actually knew nothing about what was going on. And she kind of just asked me a few questions, and it was in front of Tom, which was good because I think he knew I was struggling, but we didn't want to admit it, what was going on. I didn't want to do this. And eventually she said to Tom, she said, she needs to exclusively pump. You need to help. She can't, she wants to do breastfeed. You want the baby breastfed. She agrees to that, but she can't do this on the breast. And we both agreed. And I thought, well, this is such a win. Now I don't have to do any of the hard work. I can just pump. Again, naive. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
and so
But it's also at the same time you probably are feeling like at least this baby won't be like attached to
and
me.
I'm thinking, okay, well, this is such a win. Like I can literally now I can do this and I can work, and this is not hard. And then after a while, that gets hard. And I think I was just, to be honest, I think I was too young and naive to actually realize what being selfless kind of, I think I was a bit selfish, and I'm actually not afraid to admit that I was selfish, and that I wasn't really ready to give up those elements of my life where I couldn't go out, get a babysitter and have a few drinks and come back. I just wasn't there. And maybe that means I was a bit too young for motherhood, or maybe it wasn't. Whatever the story was, I wasn't quite there. And then so I guess I chose to formula feed Charlotte after a while, after supplementing it. It happens once or twice, and you give one bottle of formula, and then it becomes really easy. And then you start doing another one, and then suddenly, I think I only lasted about 3 months of the exclusive breastfeeding. And then suddenly it just became formula, and it was easier. I was happier, everyone was happier. And that's what happened. But I think that then obviously led to the next child, which
Well, let me ask you one before we start talking about that, because it's also a very interesting story and a very different story. Let me ask you how just about your mental state when you did switch away from even the pumping side of things and you switched to exclusively formula feeding. How did you feel?
I felt terrible. I
Oh,
felt like I
okay.
didn't want to. I felt guilty, and I knew that it was bothering Tom. But he was incredibly supportive. He really was, and I wouldn't say one bad word about the man. But guilt. It's guilt. Every time I gave it to her, I felt bad. Um, yeah, I hate the fact that it was, and I think it was more because it was my choice. There was nothing wrong. I had so much milk. I had it so easy. I had a nanny. I had everything. I should have. Looking back now, I'm like, could have tried a bit harder. You know, and yeah,
Maybe, yeah, maybe, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like all of the things that you said as far as how you were feeling about it are totally valid, and that's important, you know? So I don't want to diminish your feelings just
no,
because.
I I don't think it's diminishing my feelings. I think that if I look, I think now I would have made a way more informed decision. I would have actually tried. I don't think I tried hard enough, but at the same time, I honor what happened, and it happened, and I think I wish I had tried a bit harder. But I also know that I was a better mom now afterwards, and me and Charlotte are now inseparable. And yeah, I guess that was our journey, and she's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about Ed now.
Okay, sure. Where do you start? Okay, so with Ed, I had found out at 36 weeks that during the peak of COVID, that he had a heart defect. And long story short, we gave birth to Eddie in um, a specialist heart hospital. And we knew there was a VSD, which is a little hole in the heart, which is quite common. Um, and they were kind of worried that there might be something else wrong, but we didn't know that for sure. So we had Ed in the hospital. Everything was fine. It was a very, very different experience. They put him on my chest, and I started crying. I was emotional, as opposed to Charlotte, when I just, was a bit freaked out by the whole experience. Um, I obviously then the experience didn't go the way I wanted it to, because they then took him into NICU, NICU. Don't know how you guys say it. They took him straight there, because they were obviously worried. and Tom went off with him, and I was by myself in recovery, which I still found a little bit overwhelming. And the doctors were like, after a while, I got rolled back into my room, and they'd said everything looked fine initially, and then I got rolled back into my room, and I remember messaging my mom saying everything's fine. Like, I was so grateful. And they gave him to me, and it was this wonderful experience. And immediately just felt this drawing, like this pull to put him on my breast, which I did, and he just latched, and everything was perfect. And I remember just lying there, and I think it was just the smile on my face was so large, and Tom's face was so large, and I think it was probably because we'd expected that, something so different. There was obviously talk of him going off straight into surgery, and it would have been very different. And so we were so grateful, and it just happened naturally, and he was on my breast. I remember lying there feeling, I was like, why didn't I like this? This is so special. And he was latching, and I was so happy, so happy. And I still remember that. And when I say I was so happy, and I say it over and over again because I can recall that feeling. I was so happy. And then, yeah, it was almost like the rug just got pulled completely from our feet, because a few hours later, and I can't really recall exactly how it all went because I think I was in such shock, but a few hours later they came back almost rushing back, and the cardiologist's face, who he'd taken scans and done a proper echogram, I think that's what you call it, to look at Ed. He got the results back, and he came rushing in, and they realized there was a major heart defect, and he actually wasn't getting blood flow to the bottom half of his body. So
Wow.
he had been kind of living off the blood flow within me. So he needed to be immediately rushed back to the NICU and put on a lot of pipes and wires and all of that to keep him going. And yeah, so he came in, and then they literally took him, and they took him back to NICU, and I guess that's where he ended up staying for a very long time. And I then was left in the situation that was, first of all, was in COVID. So my husband wasn't even allowed to stay the night. I think about an hour after I got that news, and bear in mind that news gives you a 1 in 5 chance of survival.
Wow.
It also tells you that you have to have open heart surgery, which is an 8-hour operation. And there's obviously a lot of complications that can come out of open heart surgery and being on bypass. So you kind of left with the situation where this, your child's now not with you, your husband's not with you. And yeah, it was just a very overwhelming feeling. And I think I was in such shock that they gave me sleeping pills, and they were like, no, we'll wake you up to feed. And I think I just couldn't get up the one that I had taken so many meds, because now they've given me the sleeping pill. I was in pain from the cesarean. I already was on anti-anxiety pills, and I think I just mixed up a whole lot of stuff, and I didn't really care because, quite frankly, I didn't want to feel at that moment. And I was struggling to wake up to get there when he was crying,
Yeah.
to feed him. And I actually think they just left me once or twice, and they gave him some special formula that the doctor said, oh, that's another part of the story. But anyway, so I'd process the news and all that kind of stuff, and I would go into the NICU to feed Ed, because obviously now I wanted this whole experience, and because now he's now in a completely different area to me, and I'm only seeing him certain times of the day again because of COVID. It was very
Yeah.
difficult. They had to sterilize that area so much, which I completely understand, because those tiny babies cannot get COVID. And yeah, so I'd go in, but I had this like tiny little cubicle to now feed him, and I had to be wearing full, I want to call it PPE, but I know that it's not what they call it in the US. It's a protective wear. So I'll pop a photo of that. But it was like a full-on yellow plastic coat, and then I had to wear a mask. I had to wear gloves. I had to wear a hairnet. I had to sterilize quite a few times, and then you are literally on a plastic chair, squashed between all these babies, and you now trying to feed. I didn't have a pillow. I remember I didn't even have a breastfeeding pillow. And I was just like trying, and he had like all these different wires, like life-saving wires all over this kid. And now you're trying to balance this. Your husband isn't there to help you, which he always would have, like at least you just have some general support. And I'm trying, sitting there, and there's other men in the NICU because, well, they've got children in there. And I'm trying to like also cover myself because I just was feeling a bit vulnerable. And yeah, I didn't have the right clothes, and I didn't, because I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting to just take my top off in my private room and feed. And it was horrible. It was horrible. But I also was just like, okay, well, this is the only thing I can do for you now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I carried on breastfeeding, but and then I was talking to the doctor, the ped, and he was a breastfeeding advocate. Like you'd swear he had breastfed himself. Like he knew everything. And he was going on and on and on about the value of it. And yes, I know that, especially when your child is lying there in this he's sick, he is on his deathbed. I know
Yeah.
breast milk is best for this child, and that's all I can give him. Um, and then because I was really struggling with anxiety and everything was just, it was so
Yeah.
bad. And I was struggling to get up in the night because I was taking so many sleeping pills to not feel, because I didn't want to bond with this child. And I did,
Yeah.
because I was scared he was going to die, because that was the rate I was given. Realistically, I mean, I was in palliative care. Like it was bad. And
Yeah.
anyway, so he said to me, listen, I can top you up with some special formula. But it was almost like a lecture he gave me. He said, I will give you this formula that costs X amount, that has to be prescribed by medical aid because it doesn't ruin the gut lining of your child. I don't know what the stuff was called, but anyway, there's this fancy formula, and he would only give it to me if I was like kind of committed to breastfeeding, because what's the point if you're not? Because if you're going to put any formula, if you're going to top up with just any formula, it's going to ruin its gut lining. And so there's no point in paying for this fancy one. Basically, in so many words, that's what he was saying.
Wow.
Tom being Tom, bring in the fancy formula. I'll pay for the formula. Like he just, anything, he was helpless. But anyway, I guess long story short, there were so many elements along that journey that were different, and I really wanted to breastfeed. After 4 days, I needed to be discharged from the hospital, which would mean that I would be away from him. So when he cries, I couldn't it was a 20-minute drive. I couldn't be there. So
Yeah.
also that decision, that was a huge guilt-ridden decision, because now I'm making a decision. Do I leave the hospital, or I can board in the hospital and leave my toddler, who wasn't allowed
Oh,
in to visit or anything because of COVID. So it was either you see her, you can't step out of the hospital, then come back, because you needed COVID tests to come back.
oh my
So
goodness.
and now I'm in this space where I've got this basically dying baby, and then I've got my toddler at home that's desperate for me, and I am mentally completely unstable.
Yeah.
I needed to go home. I just wanted to go home. And yeah, so I made the call, and I knew that once I left that hospital, the only way they would let me in more times, because you technically can't deny a mother the opportunity to feed their child, and I knew my rights there, and the doctors would support me. I knew that I needed to breastfeed this child on the breast, because that's the only way I would see him when I wanted. So I was committed
Yeah.
to doing that. So I left the hospital, but that was kind of the catch-22. I could go back anytime because I was going to feed, and I was going to be there, and they were going to phone me when he needed to feed. And I was pumping as well. So they had a stash. So like if I couldn't get there, they had that stash. But because I really wanted to have that bonding experience with him, I said to the nurse, I remember the one day I said, please, can you just call me before the lunchtime feed? Call me when he wakes up, and then I'll just rush through. And she did. She called me, and I rushed through, but I didn't obviously make it in time. And Eddie he cried and cried so much and screamed so much that he actually ended up really affecting his heart, which was obviously not functioning very well. And he ended up going into that cardiac shock. And yeah, they had to shock him, and it was bad. So after that, I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. And I think that was my turning point. I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't. It's just that the guilt of that was too much. And then on top of that, his heart surgery was scheduled on the Monday, which was exactly 7 days post his surgery. And on the Sunday, we went in to kind of, I don't want to say, it wasn't to say goodbye, but it was just to, spend time with him. And we found out that they'd cancelled the surgery for the next day because of an infection, severe infection. And one of the words that they used was that there'd been some blood that had got into one of the lines. And without saying it, I took on that feeling, because when I was trying to breastfeed, I think I'd been tugging on the lines and something had gone wrong. And so those two things together, I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I cannot put this on myself anymore. I'll exclusively pump. And the doctor was not happy. He basically told me, well, once you start, he was like, well, once you start pumping, your supply kind of just diminishes and it's just too easy to stop. So yeah, okay, cool, pump. That was his attitude.
Oh, come on.
He broke my heart, really. And Tom was so angry, and that I really respected that about Tom. He saw this and he eventually had words with him, because he was very rude. But I could see that none of the doctors were happy about my decision.
And you were in such a crazy spot. Like, what the hell were you supposed to do?
I mean, I remember one day being in that situation, and Tom and I weren't allowed to be together with him when he was in NICU, so we kind of had to pass the baton. And I remember I was sitting there and I saw Tom, and he walked in, and I just wanted 1 second to be together, all three of us. And there was like some horrible nurse who just like screamed across the room that it's one at a time or something. So, and I'll never forget, I just like this, I think my blood pressure just dropped, and I just like ended up falling to the floor, and I think it was just everything. And because I'd just been discharged by the hospital, they panicked, because it was kind of on them if something happened to me. So they rushed me through and they did all these tests on me, but I think it was just pure, just breaking. I was just breaking inside. Anyway, long story short, I did decide not to exclusively pump, and Eddie went in for his operation, and he had an incredibly successful operation. He was in his op for 8 hours, and he had a really, really unstable night. They ended up resuscitating him 3 times that night. It wasn't good at all. I don't think the fact that Eddie's here is a miracle on its own, but yeah, he was really touch and go that night. That was a Monday. By the Thursday, I think by the Wednesday, they still weren't quite sure. And I remember the doctor saying to me when I was visiting him, he said a line like, there's still more we can do. And I remember going, geez, okay, what does that mean? You're trying to divulge all this information, and there was a child next door that it hadn't gone well for, and there was crying parents and wailing parents, and it was a really horrible experience. And anyway, I was pumping throughout all this time because Eddie couldn't eat. Obviously, he'd just been through the surgery, so he was in a coma, and so I had a really good stash. That was a good thing. And then miracles happened, and he pulled through. And I think it was the Thursday, the day after that, things started just going really well. And then within 5 days from that, he started to have his first few breast milk feeds through a drip, and yeah, he did really well. I still wasn't obviously able for him to latch, but he was moved up to the NICU, so he wasn't in the cardiac ICU anymore. So the NICU was a promotion. And then they basically said to me, when now it's really just about learning for him to feed again. And he was only allowed to leave the NICU once he could have 100 mils by himself. And there again, now they wanted me to latch again and reteach him to feed. But now I know that my child can only leave this place once he can drink 100 mils.
Right.
Which for me was just, they were going to be basing, if I latched, they were going to be basing that on his weight. And it, like, as a control freak, I don't know, that was too much for me. It was just too much for me to even comprehend. So I stuck with the feeding tube. They had a feeding tube and they were feeding him, and I was pumping. And they started to introduce a bottle, and then it was a bottle and a feeding tube. And then the doctor said to me, well, you can take him home, but you're going to have to change the nasal the nasal feeding tube yourself. So I said, okay, well, fine. How do we do that? And he gave me a demonstration where he's pushing this pipe down my child's nose.
Oh,
The child's hysterically screaming, and he said, no, 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 don't worry, I've taught grannies to do this. And I just thought, again, who do you think you are? Now I must take this child home, and you want me to change what is wrong with you? Like, this is not okay. There are people that are qualified to do this. Why do I have to go through more trauma with this child?
yeah.
You know? And he then guilted me again. He said, well, then he can stay here, but, you can stay here until he can drink 100 mils. And then again, guilt. I made the decision to leave him there for a few more days because I couldn't take that on. And I'm still glad I did that. I absolutely would never have coped with that nasal tube, and maybe other people would, but I wouldn't have. And so he stayed home, and eventually when he got home, he was drinking 100 mils. It was all I could measure, and heart babies, one of the biggest things that they look out for is weight. So for me, it was a best possible decision, and I completely validate the decision to exclusively pump. But then again, even though Eddie was this heart baby and this insane miracle, and he potentially has more like would have had health issues, and he couldn't really get sick and all these types of things, I now had a toddler, a job with more bills to pay, and this baby. I couldn't do it anymore. So after 3-4 months, again, then I made the decision to start supplementing formula. And again, doctor was not happy, very clearly not happy. And I can understand why to an extent, because they look at the situation and they're like, geez, you're really lucky to have this child. Like, could you not just push through a bit longer to 6 months? And I couldn't, Vanessa. I was so emotionally drained from everything. I had PTSD. I was too scared to love my baby. I thought he was going to die. I just couldn't. So there again, I made the decision. And it was probably the best decision for me because I realized how mentally unstable I was at the time and how much healing I needed to do from that traumatic event. And
Yeah.
that's very different to Charlotte, as you can tell. It was this, as I frame it, a bit of a selfish decision. And with Ed, I guess it was very much just a decision based on my mental health. But all's well that ends well, and Eddie's doing really well, and he's really strong, and he put on all his weight, and yeah.
He's 2 now.
He's 2, thriving 2-year-old.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel like, I mean, first of all, I can't imagine going through something like that. And you are a complete rock star and trooper for navigating that. And even like trying so hard to breastfeed him and going to the hospital in that gear. I can't even imagine like gloves. And I mean, that is I'm with you. Like even just sitting around, I remember I spent like the first month or more of my kid's life completely topless in my house all the time, right? Because it's like, okay, just bring the baby, whatever. I can't imagine having all of that on in that kind of situation with that kind of worry, trying to figure out how to even like hold him, let alone nurse him. And yeah, I can understand to some vague level what you must have felt and still never truly know because that is really intense.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously like are awesome for having done everything you did, and he's doing fine.
Yeah.
He's doing better than fine.
Yeah, he really
I
is.
mean, thank goodness. Thank goodness he was the 1 out of 5, I mean, that's
Really was.
crazy.
And I'm so grateful. And I have so much grace for myself in that time. I really do. So much grace. And I'm completely stand by my decision. Whereas, as I say with Charlotte, I feel like I could have done better. And I know how to give myself grace because I did that. I can give that with Ed. I wish I'd done a little bit better with Charlotte, but so be it. Yeah, with Ed, I really do give myself grace because I don't even think I realized how messed up I was at the time. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it doesn't seem like the formula had any sort of negative consequence for him. So the formula that you gave him, was it the expensive formula or did you find something else?
No, because they won't give you the expensive formula if you're not going to go back to breastfeeding.
Oh, got it.
So I'll never forget, I gave him his first bottle of formula and I'll never forget it. He vomited the whole thing up, obviously.
Oh,
And then eventually I found one. It was actually something to do with the lactose and blah, blah. And I had to get a different formula. But I remember just crying. I mean, I think all moms do. I think most moms would admit that when you first give that bottle of formula, there's no way you're not going to feel guilty
yeah.
or whatever. And then the baby vomits it all up. That's when you
Like, what am I doing?
when you feel real guilty.
What have I done to my child?
Yeah.
So how did that end? Was it the same for? Did he like just get used to it, or what
No,
happened?
I just gave him the same formula that I gave Charlotte, and then I went to another doctor because I wasn't going back there, and they helped me choose one that was better for his gut, and then it was fine. Everything was fine.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Kyllie, thank you very much for sharing your incredible story with us. As you know, everyone that's listening out there, we have an app that's here to support moms, breastfeeding, formula feeding, etc. Kyllie, any thoughts on how Leva could have helped you in your journey?
Definitely. I think that potentially the tracking, the pumping tracking would have helped me especially when I was working to those 100 mils feeds and I had such a specific goal to get to. I think that could have helped me just feel a little bit more in control because, as you can tell from my story, I'm a bit of a control freak. Um, Another thing which I still laugh at to this day, and it just comes back to general support from motherhood and from potentially a lactation consultant. Something so simple that really, I think, played a huge part in my decision to stop pumping when I had Charlotte was I didn't realize that you could get breastfeeding pumping bras. So I used to sit and hold it for
Mm.
30 minutes, okay? And the milk would spill if I tried to get my phone or something so stupid like that. And I'll never forget putting on the bra when I was pumping for Ed, and I was like, oh, okay. So you don't have to hold this. That gives me so much. I can walk around the house and do this. Obviously, it's more manageable. I remember like constantly having milk spilt everywhere. And I think to this day, I think I literally had nobody. Like my mom, I mean, she was there with me all the time, and my nanny. But I mean, I don't even know if pumps were around back then, or especially these fancy Medala kind of electrical things. She didn't know. And I had nobody around me that actually suggested that. Nobody told me. So for 3 months, I pumped like that. And had somebody potentially told me, or had I had support, or had I even thought to ask the question, maybe things would have been different for me. And I think that's so simple and such a silly little example, but it just shows how some people don't know and
No.
how you can go into these things at 28 years old and not know you don't know these things. And
Oh my God, no, I totally relate to what you're saying about that bra. I had no idea either that they made bras for that. And I don't have the excuse of being 28. I was 36, but 37 actually, like when I was pumping. But anyway, my friend had given me a bunch of her baby's like old clothes. And so I remember like opening up before my baby was born, opening up the box and going through all the old clothes. And there was this pink thing that was clearly not for the baby. And I didn't know what it was, but it was like a wrap. It looked like a tube top.
yeah,
It was obviously the bra, and it had holes in the front. I had no flippin' idea what this thing was. And then I don't know how I figured it out, but eventually I figured out, oh, this is the bra for the pumps. But I had no idea, And like, fortunately, it was in that box she gave me. But yeah, why isn't that something that we talk about? Why?
and breast pads.
Yeah, totally.
Simple. It's stuff like that. I didn't know, and I didn't even know to ask.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
if I had just had this app potentially and I was reading and maybe reading through some articles, maybe I would have known. Or maybe I would have been targeted with an ad. I don't know. But I feel like sometimes, and Vanessa, maybe this is more of a business part of our conversation, but I think sometimes you actually need to have like how to get ready for a baby for dumping. Like
100%.
sometimes we need to just remember that people don't know. You
Right.
just don't know, and you also don't necessarily know to ask because 9 times out of 10, the person that's supporting you is your mom or an
Yeah.
older or a granny or a nanny that potentially is between 20 years down the line, and it's not the same experience. So
No doubt. No doubt.
sometimes I think we just need to remember to say the dumb things, or simple
No,
things.
I love it. I love it. I think it's a fantastic insight. And my parents were all about giving my kid rice cereal. And I'm like, I didn't want to do that. I actually really want to try to figure out how to breastfeed him, guys. I understand it. Like, but to your point, it's different, right?
Yeah.
It's a different generation. But you're right. And I think it's a really good reminder that putting the information in the hands of the mom right at the moment they need it is so critical.
Yeah.
And that's something that we are working on doing, right? As part of what we're doing with Leva. But I love what you've said. I love the reminder because it helps me think about different ways that we can continue to improve. So I think it's fantastic. Okay. Any other thoughts that you want to add before we sign off?
I think I just want to make sure that everybody knows that, even with my experience and that I ended up working or having my own business because I wanted to be a good mom, and I didn't end up breastfeeding and all this and pumping and all those things because I wanted to be a good mom, that it's very much because that's my feelings. And I don't think that that represents being a good mom. I think
Yeah.
that's how I could be a good mom. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that are working corporate jobs and doing flipping brilliantly, and they might be away from 9 to 5, but they just, their personalities and the way they've structured their life is works for their children and all of that. I just knew that I couldn't do that. So it's very much me and not the general. It's not something I think is a general comment.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for saying that. No, I mean, I think that's a really good point too. Everyone has their own different experience and their own different story. And I was a corporate mom for 5 years, right? Like my kid's 5 now. So for most of his life to this point. And I feel like I was a good mom. And I think, like, you can be a stay-at-home mom and be a great mom. Like there's no one way to be a good mom. I think it's all about taking care of yourself, making sure that you are healthy and you have the support you need and that your mental health is looked after, and then everything else comes after that, right? So as long as you're making decisions that are best for you, that's the most important thing. And then of course you're the best mom for your baby because you're their mom,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yeah. It's all about just choosing what works for you, and don't try and compare yourself. Just it's what works for you. You know what works for you, and you just got to do that.
I love it. Well said.
Yeah.
All right. Such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable. I feel like this was incredible and insightful for me because I learned a lot more about your journey than I even knew. And I know that there are going to be a lot of folks out there that get to hear this and can really resonate and appreciate what you shared. And of course, it's a pleasure having you on the team, as you know.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, everybody. Our Leva app is in the app stores now. So check out the Google Play Store, Leva Mom and Baby Tracking app if you need more details on how to search for it, and the Apple App Store. So go get it now. We are there to support you every step of the way. And we are 100% responsive to emails and comments. So let us know what you like, what you love, what you wish was different. And we will absolutely take that feedback into consideration. Download it now and let us know what your thoughts are.